Welcome to the Sacred Life. I'm your host, Aaron Beachy, coming to you from Higher Ground Fellowship in Kokomo, Indiana. We at the Sacred Life are dedicated to practical Christian ideas. Today I'm joined by David Baylor for another episode of Ancient Insights, also joined by his brother John Baylor. Today, David will be sharing with us from a book called Theologia Germanica. So, David, what's this all about?
Um, so this is a fairly significant, fairly influential book written in the late Middle Ages. I think it was written around 1350. I think it was. It was pretty influential to the Protestants, to the Anabaptists, but it was also very influential, I guess you could say, in folk Christianity during the late Middle Ages, especially in Germany, the German-speaking areas. You would call it, I guess, a work of medieval German mysticism, which means looking at religion in personal terms, rather than institutional and ritualistic terms. Um, it will be, I guess, in contrast to some of the other things that we've been reading on Ancient Insights, discussing more doctrinal and theological points. This is more like practical spiritual advice, teaching, like dealing more with how do you as a Christian live.
Okay.
I guess you're also a little bit familiar with the idea with the Theologia Germanica. You have anything else to add before we start?
I am very little familiar with
Very
it.
little.
I know of some of its influence, but
You're right. That's more what I was thinking.
yeah, right. There are a lot of poets down through the ages who have drawn a lot from it as well.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into it.
All right, so we will go ahead and start. Theologia Germanica, Chapter 1, of that which is perfect and that which is in part, and how that which is in part is done away when that which is perfect is come. St. Paul says, when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. Now mark what is that which is perfect and that which is in part. That which is perfect is a being, who has comprehended and included all things in himself and his own substance, and without whom and beside whom there is no true substance, and in whom all things have their substance. For he is the substance of all things, and is in himself unchangeable and immovable, and changes and moves all things else. But that which is in part, or the imperfect, is that which has its source in or springs from the perfect, just as a brightness or a visible appearance flows out from the sun or a candle, and appears to be somewhat this or that, and it is called a creature. And of all these things which are in part, none is the perfect. So also the perfect is none of the things which are in part. The things which are in part can be apprehended, known, and expressed, but the perfect cannot be apprehended, known, or expressed by any creature as creature. Therefore we do not give a name to the perfect, for it is none of these. The creature as creature cannot know nor apprehend it, name nor conceive it. Now when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. But when does it come? I say, when as much as may be it is known, felt, and tasted of the soul. For the lack lies altogether in us, and not in it. In like manner the sun lights the whole world, and is as near to one as another. Yet a blind man sees it not, but the fault thereof lies in the blind man, not in the sun. And like as the sun may not hide its brightness, but must give light to the earth, for heaven indeed draws its light and heat from another fountain. So also God, who is the highest good, wills not to hide himself from any, wherever he finds a devout soul that is thoroughly purified from all creatures. For in what measure we put off the creature, in that same measure are we able to put on the Creator. Neither more nor less. For if my eye is to see anything, it must be single, or else be purified from all other things. And where heat and light enter in, cold and darkness must depart. It cannot be otherwise. But one might say, now since the perfect cannot be known nor apprehended of any creature, but the soul is a creature, how can it be known by the soul? Answer, this is why we say, by the soul as a creature. We mean it is impossible to the creature in virtue of its creature nature and qualities, that by which it says, I and myself. For in whatever creature the perfect shall be known, therein creature nature, qualities, the I, the self, and the like must all be lost and done away. This is the meaning of that saying of St. Paul, when that which is perfect is come, that is, when it is known, then that which is in part, namely creature nature, qualities, the I, the self, the mind, will be despised and counted for nothing. So long as we think much of these things, hold tightly to them with love, pleasure, or desire, so long remains the perfect unknown to us. But it might further be said, you say, beside the perfect there is no substance, yet say again that something flows out from it. Now is not that which has flowed out from it something beside it? Answer, this is why we say beside it or without it, for there is no true substance. That which has flowed forth from it is no true substance. It has no substance except in the perfect, but is an accident or a brightness or a visible appearance, which is no substance, and has no substance except in the fire where the brightness flowed forth, such as the sun or a candle. Let's go ahead and talk about that section before we read more. This book is divided into a bunch of short sections. I think it probably work best to discuss each one. So because each one has a somewhat different topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm a little curious. You introduced it by saying this was more practical advice.
Yeah, it does start off pretty, I guess, philosophical.
Yeah, right.
But still, he is actually making a point there that once you see what he's saying, you understand that it is practical, which is basically the argument about that which is perfect is come, and that which is in part is done away. Essentially, what he's saying is anything that is somehow outside of God itself, to the person that seeks God, all of those lesser things will become less and less important. That's what I see more or less is what he's presenting here.
Yeah.
He's presenting this idea that what Paul is saying is that as we draw near to God, that all these earthly things will fade away. All these lesser things that we're serving, or so like he uses, especially the illustration of the I and the self and mind.
Right.
What is mind? So it's like you have to understand when he's speaking of creature, a lot of what he's actually speaking of is in terms of thoughts and ideas and philosophies, not what we would today think of as creatures, like animals or created things. He's speaking of ideas and philosophies and doctrines and teachings as being created things. So you could say it's kind of like a philosophical proposition that, well, your philosophies and your doctrines are themselves created things, and that means they are inferior.
Mm-hmm. So I'll make just a couple of comments on there. So on with this idea of creature, in as much as you put off the creature, then you are able to put on the creator. And so this becomes like the goal. You know, if you look at this as advice, then the central piece of advice probably is put off that creature and put on the creator. Putting off the creature means putting off that part of you that seeks for the I and the self and the mind and me and, you know, all the kind of stuff that he lists out there. Somehow as you were reading through that section with the I and the mind and the creature nature, it made me think of, well, I guess generally you could say content creation, which is what we're doing, but specifically I was thinking in terms of music, a musician or somebody who's trying to promote themselves as a musician and doing YouTube promotion and all this stuff, then the idea that like I'm the brand and I need to like promote myself and put myself out there and like all this, that's like the cardinal commandment is like promote yourself, put yourself out there into the world, and it's sort of like this sort of ultimate exalting of the creature nature, exalting of the I and the mind, and this this selfish thing that you might be serving, and anybody who's like seeking fame and influence is doing that, promoting themselves in that way, and so you have a world that on the surface is going to be dominated by people that are serving themselves, and kind of like quietly in the background, you have people like what the book is calling you to be, people who have put that off,
Right.
and they're just not on the television. Um, they're not all over YouTube and whatever and promoting themselves. They're like in a sense like the real lifeblood of the world, um, but but they're like invisible to you if you're not looking at things deeply enough.
Yeah, there were a couple of points that I was trying to keep track of while I was reading that it would be useful to clarify. So first of all, he is saying, let me find it here, where he's talking about he's drawing towards the beginning the contrast between the perfect and that which is in part, and talking about those things that are in part are actually derived from the perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very important to people in the Middle Ages, is that all things are derived from the Godhead, are derived from the substance of God. All things, I mean, and that's biblical, obviously, as well. Everything has its substance and being in God.
Well, it's very reminiscent also of the like truisms of psychology that this idea of like your goal essentially is to be an integrated person, which in a sense you could say that's like you're trying to become a perfect or more perfect person. And the opposite of that is a fragmented person where you have all these scattered things. Um, that's like God is one, but the demon is many, is legion. It's like it's fragmented and broken into all these tiny pieces. So also this idea of like the part comes from the perfect, but like the part, its highest aim would be to be integrated with the perfect.
Right, and he also uses the illustration of light coming from the sun or from a candle or something like that. And I think the point he's making there is the appearance of glory, the appearance of God. So what is manifested to us on earth is not actually God. It's just something, because we can't actually comprehend the fullness of God. So he's saying, and I think the reason for that point is to illustrate your understanding, your doctrine, your teaching, your faith is merely an appearance of it. It's you can comprehend it, but you understand that there's more to it. You understand that God is unattainable, unreachable, infinite, undefinable, so it can't be limited to your perception of it. That's his point there. Like the sun isn't limited by the light that comes out from it. The substance of the sun is something more than that. And then he also makes it. Well, I don't know. Do you have any comments on that?
I was kind of also hanging on this idea the perfect cannot be known nor apprehended of any creature. And then he says, but it can be apprehended by the soul. But this idea that the perfect cannot be known strikes me, I haven't read the work, but that strikes me as something that will be an important idea. that there's a sense in which God isn't knowable. What is knowable is the manifestations of God. And I mean, like in particular, you may say like, well, Christ is this ultimate manifestation of God that is knowable. And everything else you might say is well, a part of the perfect, a part that is derived from the perfect, everything that you encounter in life. But the Godhead itself is going to be unknowable and invisible.
And then it's important to point out, and I'll just make this the last thing, and then we'll move on to the next one, is a modern person might read that that can't be apprehended by the creature, but it can be known by the soul. They might equate the soul. A modern person would equate the soul with the mind, but a medieval person does not. The mind is the creature. So really, what he's actually saying it here is your rational senses can't apprehend God. So again, your doctrine, your theologies, all of your collected knowledge can't apprehend the truth of God.
Yeah, and that idea of known, I thought essentially you were going to make exactly the point that you just did, but that you were going to hinge it on what does it mean to know something, and that we might, as a modern person, think that to know something is to like, okay, I've got the list of facts about it memorized, but that's not what it means to know a person. That's not what it means to what you might say like know an experience or a feeling or something like that. So like the soul has this different way of knowing.
All right. I think we'll go ahead and move on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is pretty short. So yeah, let's go ahead and read chapter 2. Of what sin is, and how we must not take to ourselves any good thing, seeing that it belongs to the true God alone. The scripture and the faith and the truth say sin is nothing else but that the creature turns away from the unchangeable good and commits itself to the changeable. That is to say that it turns away from the perfect to that which is in part and imperfect, and most often to itself. Now mark, when the creature claims for its own anything good, such as substance, life, knowledge, power, and in short, whatever we should call good, as if it were that, or possessed that, or that were itself, or that proceeded from it, as often as this comes to pass, the creature goes astray. What did the devil do else, or what was his going astray and his fall else, but that he claimed for himself to be also something, and would have it that something was his, and something was due to him. This setting up of a claim, and his I and me and mine, these were his going astray and his fall, and thus it is to this day. So I think there's quite a lot in that short little passage. And I think it probably clarifies chapter 1 a little bit too.
This idea that the devil thinks that he is something, also to me kind of calls to mind, you're describing the perfect, and the part comes from the perfect, but it's not the perfect. In a sense, it's not a thing in itself, but the part is something that participates in the divine nature. And when this little fragment claims to be something, it's like it's saying, in a sense, it's almost like saying there's nothing over me. I am a thing, and reality emanates from me.
Right. I think I'm going to go ahead and actually read chapter 3 real quick too, because it's actually building on that same thought. I think we need to get it in on the same episode.
Okay.
So rather than we'll go back and comment on both chapter 2 and 3 more. So chapter 3, how man's fall and going astray must be amended as Adam's fall was. What else did Adam do but this same thing? It is said it was because Adam ate the apple that he was lost, or fell. I say it was because of his claiming something for his own, and because of his I, mine, me, and the like. He had he eaten 7 apples, and yet never claimed anything for his own, he would not have fallen. But as soon as he called something his own, he fell, and would have fallen if he had never touched an apple. Behold, I have fallen 100 times more often and deeply, and gone 100 times farther astray than Adam. And not all mankind could amend this fall, or bring him back from going astray. But how shall my fall be amended? It must be healed as Adam's fall was healed, and on the self same way. By whom and on what way was that healing brought to pass? Mark this, man could not without God, and God should not without man. Therefore God took human nature or manhood upon himself, and was made man, and man was made divine. Thus the healing was brought to pass. So also must my fall be healed. I cannot do the work without God, and God may not or will not without me. For if it shall be accomplished in me too, God must be made man, in such sort that God must take to himself all that is in me, within and without, so that there may be nothing in me which strives against God or hinders his work. Now if God took to himself all men that are in the world, or ever were, and were made man in them, and they were made divine in him, and this work were not fulfilled in me, my fall and my wandering would never be amended, except it were fulfilled in me also. And in this bringing back and healing, I can or may or shall do nothing of myself, but just simply yield to God, so that he alone may do all things in me and work, and I may suffer him in all his work in his divine will. And because I will not do so, but I count myself to be my own, and say I, mine, me, and the like, God is hindered, so that he cannot do his work in me alone and without hindrance. For this cause my fall and my going astray remain unhealed. Behold, this all comes of my claiming something for my
I first want to just turn to Aaron and see if he's got a thought there.
Well, I think, after the first chapter, it was a little bit, this seems a little bit heavy. But as we've gotten into the next few chapters, I think right, and I think it becomes a little more clear. But what really stands out to me is the I, the mind, and what was the last one? Me. Like that's, this is something that was written. I don't know how many years ago this was written. I don't know if we actually know for sure.
I'd just say roughly 700 years ago.
Yeah, but these are words that ring true in what we face in life today on a very intense level. That is to say that oftentimes we find ourselves. Even the three of us here, I think that we could admit that on a level that maybe sometimes we don't even understand, that there are things that become things in our minds and in our view of life many times that we don't even realize are hindering God. And just to say that these are good things to hear, and very good for this modern world that we're living in.
I mentioned, sort of this quest for fame and promoting yourself and making yourself out to be something very important. And in a sense, I feel the same thing in this description of Adam, who, as soon as he called something his own, he fell. And there's this reference to several times, calling it my own. Kind of very similar to Satan saying, or the devil, I don't know, remember the language it uses, saying that I am something, and Adam is saying I have something, and it's very convicting, because you look over the course of your life and you see how much of your life is devoted to having something, even if it's just having a certain accomplishment that you can kind of wear on your sleeve, and everybody will be impressed by this accomplishment that you've checked off.
The thing that struck out to me the most, the first time I read this and then reading this again, is I guess I would just describe it as the personalizing and the internalizing of the incarnation of Christ. So he's making a pretty a pretty bold statement, especially in the context of the time, that like, well, it's not the external incarnation of God in the world that actually makes a difference in your life personally. It's it's when that happens in your own soul. It's when that happens inside. Like God God must be made man inside of you and raise you to this divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think like that's an incredibly powerful image. It's like he's really driving this point that like this Christianity is a deeply personal thing.
So he asked, how shall my fall be amended? Adam claimed that something was his, and that was this fall that's had these repercussions throughout history, and I've done 100 times worse. How shall my fall be amended? And it's like, in a sense, that's a question you don't get to ask if you have that sort of like external view that you were talking about the work of Christ. Like you can just simply say, "Oh, my fall has already been amended." Like you never have to wrestle with sort of the reality of your own sinfulness and the consequences of it. I read something like that, and I think of like, okay, Adam's fall affects generations, many generations, and everyone falls after him. Okay, well, I still fall and I still make mistakes. I'm thinking about like when he says, "How shall my fall be amended?" And I'm thinking about like, oh man, what's some way when I've been like angry with my kids or something like that when I shouldn't have been, and what are the consequences of that in their lives when they grow up, and so there's like this very kind of real practical question of how shall my fall be amended if I made a mistake that hinders my kids in some way, hinders the work of God in my kids. I better find some way to amend this.
Well, I like that his diagnosis of the problem is extraordinarily simple, but it works. It's a very simple diagnosis that works. It's that your whole problem is that you think you're something. Because you think you're something, you think you do something, or you think you have something. And the solution is to realize that you are nothing. Before God, you are nothing. And this goes back to what was confusing in chapter 1 about the creature basically being nothing. Because you see, that's kind of the framework here, is that you've got to realize what you are when you're being compared to the Creator. And what you are compared to the Creator is nothing. And you have nothing outside of the Creator. And when you realize that and yield yourself to that, that's when you can be saved. I just think like it's just such, I don't know, I guess you could say such a beautiful look at it. And I especially like that statement. I'll kind of paraphrase it, rephrase it, I don't know, in a way that makes more sense to our modern ears. That basically he says if God would redeem every single other person in the world but me, it wouldn't do me any good. Like I would still be lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't gain anything by the rest of the world being saved.
Very good word. I think that's a good thought to end with right there. That if I'm thinking only about the redemption of others and how they need to be fixed, that does me no good. I want to thank you for joining us on the Sacred Life again, and we wish you peace in Christ.